This video is going to demonstrate using loops within your pseudocode and Raptor. The entire design document is in the Angel folder for Chapter 5 demos. I highly recommend that you print this out or that you have it open while you're watching the video, as I'm not going to go through each section in a lot of detail. Our scenario is that we are a server, or we are a manager of a restaurant, and all of our servers have to record the total sales for the evening, their total tips, and they have to identify their average tips. So they want a computer program that will calculate all of this information for them. So our algorithm for this is we're going to ask for the username, we're going to ask for the number of tickets, we're going to ask for the sales amount for each ticket, we're going to ask for the tip amount for each ticket. We're going to accumulate the total of their sales, we're going to accumulate their total tips, and then the program will calculate the average tip by the amount of tickets that they entered. Once everything has been entered, they can go through and they can calculate that. Then the output will display the server's name, total number of tickets, total sales, total tips earned, and their average tips. The last thing the program will do is it will ask if there are additional servers to process their nightly tickets. Since we know how to do loops, there will be no one-time run programs. All our programs from here on out will run until the user wants them to stop with their Sentinel value. I have my variables here, which again you can look at, my formulas, which are pretty straightforward, my hierarchy, which is a little bit new. I'm going to be executing the call amounts from the get sales tip info module, so it's going to hang off of that instead of being called from the main module. My top-down design, my test data. Again, you'll see in my test data that I have some invalid data. Once you're going through and you're validating your user information, you want to check for invalid data as well. So I have my invalid data in red. You'll also notice that I have my runs in separate colors. So I have one run, two runs. I have two different people in this one. And then I have David, Sam, and Tom, which are all individual runs. Remember that the test data, I need 5 complete data sets. So this is 5 complete data sets. It doesn't mean that every user, every server you enter for this one is a completely new data set. So I'm going to come down to my pseudocode. I have my block comments. I have my main module with my starting and ending of it. The first thing I'm doing in my main module is executing my welcome. So my welcome module down here, same basic stuff. I've broken out the declaration and the initialization this time because I'm going to reinitialize these values every time a new server is entered. If I come back to my algorithm, you can see my last step is ask if there's any additional servers to process. If there are, then I'm going to repeat steps 1 through 9. So to do this, I'm going to go and I'm going to set a loop above these initializations. So my loop will be going, and it will be a post-test loop because I want the loop to execute at least once. Somebody went through and ran the program for a reason. So I'm going to put in my repeat statement here, and this will repeat until there are no more servers to enter. And the user will enter in that value. This is your Sentinel value, and we'll get to that at the end of this. I'm going to then indent all of my initializations. So I have my repeat, which is the start of my loop. In that I have my initialization. And then I'm going to put steps 1 through 9 in that particular loop. Well, what I'd like to do is I always like to terminate my loops right when I go and I start them. It makes life a little bit easier for me. So the first thing that I need to do to terminate the loop is I need to prompt the user to determine whether they actually want to run this again or not. So the variable I'm using is process again. The question I'm asking is if they want to process it, enter a Y if yes, or any other key if no. So I'm using my repeat until loop. So my until condition will be until they don't enter in an uppercase Y or a lowercase y. So again, all of this will repeat. Haven't really gotten to the core of my code, but I'm getting there now. So now if I go back and I look at my algorithm, the first thing it does is it asks for the user's name. Now that we know how to validate, we can go and we can write a series of defensive programming. Name, you really can't go through and ask a whole lot except for if the name is a number. So what I'm going to do for this, and this is an example, is I'm going to go and I'm going to prompt the user for their name and ask them to input their name. So I'm prompting the user for their name. And then once they enter that, I'm going to go and I'm going to verify it. So my verification loop is going to determine whether the name is a number. Really, you don't have too many people that have a number for their name and solely a number for their name. So if there's just a number, I'm going to ask them to re-enter it. So this is a smart message. It's not repeating the same message that I gave them the first time. So now I've completed step number 1. So step number 1 is done. So now I'm going to ask for the number of the tickets that the user has to process. Again, I'm going to go and I'm going to use a loop. You'll notice that I'm putting loops inside my loop. As long as you know that there's a start and an end to every loop, there's a starting point and a termination point to every loop. You can nest as many loops as you want to. So my loop that I'm going to be using to verify the number of tickets is a repeat until. I'm asking them to input information. I'm asking that in my repeat until, so it's a post-test loop. The loop is going to be entered at least once, and it's asking them to enter in the number of tickets in numerical format, and it gives them example. They're going to enter in the tickets, and now my validation is doing 2 things. As you learned with the is number, it's going to return true and false, but it can only return true and false. It can't determine whether they're entering in a negative number or something that's out of bounds. The server must have between 1 and 99 tickets. They can't have anything over 99, and of course they can't have less than 1 ticket. If they have less than 1 ticket, then there's no need for them to use this program. So I have my compound condition. I ask for the data type first. If I don't ask for the data type and the user puts an apple, this condition would break. You can't compare apple to a numeric value. So I always ask for the data type first, because if it's not true, then it will go and it won't even continue with the rest of the condition because I have an and operator. I put my second 2 conditions in parentheses because I want those to be evaluated as 1. So if my number of tickets is greater than 1 and it's less than 99, then it should return a true statement. So again, I have my repeat until with a compound condition. I'm asking for the user to enter in their tickets. So I've completed step number 2 here. The next item I have is I'm going to ask the user to enter in the sales amount for their tickets. I know how many tickets they have because they just told me how many tickets they have. So for this, I'm going to use a for loop. In our case, the user input, I know exactly how many times this will go through and repeat. So my for loop is going to use count as my first argument, which is going to initialize that variable. If count is less than or equal to the number of tickets, and my third parameter is I'm going to increment count by 1. So I have my initialization, my condition, and I'm going to increment it by 1. So count equals 1, coming down here, is count less than or equal to the number of tickets. Well, it should be less than or equal to because my number of tickets has to be 1 or greater. So it will then go and it will call my sales tip info module. And in my sales tip info module, I'm going to go and I'm going to ask the user to enter in the sales amount and the tip amount. So I already have that developed. So I'm going to come down and I have my repeat statement to ask them to enter in the value of the first ticket. I've made this message a little bit smarter by concatenating their name to it. So I'm asking them to enter in their sales amount. I have a similar condition down here. It's a compound condition. Again, I'm asking if it is a numerical value, and then I'm making sure that my sales amount is within a specific range. In this case, it has to be between $1 and $1,000. And then I'm doing a similar thing for my tip amount. Once I have my tip amount in, I'm going to go and I'm going to validate that it's a number, and my tip amount should be somewhere between $1 and $100. Once they enter that in for their particular ticket, Then it's going to go and it's going to execute my calc amounts. My calc amounts are my accumulators. They're going to accumulate my sales total and my tip total for that individual by going through and adding in the latest amount that the user entered. So whatever they entered in here is going to increment my sales amount. Whatever tip amount they entered is going to increment my total tip. Then this module ends. I'm going to come up here. This module would end. So I would come all the way back up to my for loop. My for loop would then come back up. It would increment count by 1. Count is now 2. If 2 is less than or equal to my number of tickets, then it will repeat that process. It will go and get the sales temp info. It will get the amount of sales on the ticket, the total tip, and then it will add those to our accumulator. Again, it will repeat that in my for loop until all tickets have been entered. Once all the tickets have been entered, my for loop will exit. Once I exit my for loop, I've entered my tip amount and my sales. I've calculated my total tip and I've calculated my total amount and I've calculated my total tip. Once all the tickets have been entered, I'm going to calculate the average tip. To calculate the average tip, I'm going to go and I'm going to take the tip amount and I'm going to divide it by count minus 1. Remember in the previous video, this will increment to 1 higher than it needs to be. So I need to subtract 1 from it and I divide that into my total tip to get my average tip. So I have, coming back to my algorithm, I have step 7 done. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to display all of this. I'm going to display this in my display module. So I'm going to execute my display module with my call statement. Coming down to my display module says, Susie, your sales for the evening were your value of your total sales, $500. Your tips were $15 with an average tip of $10. And so that's what's going to display to the individual user. Then because I've already put in my prompt to ask the user if they want to repeat it, I don't have to do that here. But if they don't want to repeat it, I'm just going to give them a little thanks for using the tip generator and then send them on their way. So let me go back to my algorithm and make sure I've taken care of everything. I've displayed all my information and I'm going to continue to run the program until the user says that they're done, until they enter in that Sentinel value. So I'm good with my algorithm. I have my modules here all ready to go, all commented. So the next thing I'm going to do is place all of this into Raptor. So now we've moved on to Raptor. I'm not going to show you all of the details of putting this Raptor file together. I'm going to show you the pertinent information or the new information. So I've started with my main module. You can see that I have my start. I'm going to execute my welcome. And then at the very end, I'm going to thank them for coming. So between them comes this big loop. And I have my repeat loop. And I'm going to repeat it until my process doesn't equal y or doesn't equal uppercase y or doesn't equal lowercase y. So that's my first loop. So to put a loop into Raptor, I'm going to use my loop symbol. My loop symbol I'm going to put between my welcome and my exit statement. You can see here I have a decision statement just like I did with my selection. You need to pay attention to the yes and the no path. The yes path will exit that particular loop. The no path will repeat that loop. So your logic in here from your pseudocode to Raptor may have to change. Do not go back and change your pseudocode to match Raptor. I understand that it's going to change and it will be okay. So my loop, by decision, I can put at the top of my statements or at the bottom of my statement. That will determine whether it's a pre or post-test loop. A pre-test loop, my decision statement will be at the top and I'll have all my statements down here. My post-test, I'll have all my statements before the diamond or my decision statement. So now that I'm in my repeat, I'm going to come down to the end and I'm going to determine what my condition is going to be. But before I can determine my condition, I really want to complete this by asking the user if they want to continue this process or not. So to do that, again, I'm going to use my input statement and I'm going to put it before my decision. That popped up on my other screen. So I'm going to go and I'm going to put in my quotes. I've used some funky formatting in Word, so I'm going to delete that for Raptor so it'll look a little bit better. And in here, I'm going to put this into my process again. So again, I'm doing this a little bit different than before. I'm going to go back and I'm going to add process again up top, but I just wanted to show you the condition. So I'm going to ask them if they want to continue. If they do, they'll enter a yes. If not, they'll enter in any other key. It will be stored in my process again variable. Once I have that, I have these two statements completed. I'm just going to go ahead and highlight those, and then I'll put in the comments later. My condition here, which will go into my loop, is an until condition. And my until, I'm going to put in the same condition that I have in my pseudocode. I don't have to flip it. So my condition is if process again doesn't equal y, and process again doesn't equal lowercase y. Then it will come and it will loop back up and it will continue to loop. So now that I have my condition in and kind of taken care of, I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to come back up to my repeat, and now I can start where I would normally start, which is going through and I'm going to be initializing all of these variables. So I'm going to pause it for a moment while I go ahead and do that because I know that you guys are familiar with that. All right, so I have all my variables in. I'm going to highlight those. And I've gone ahead and I've prompted the user for their name because we all know how to do that. Then I have to go and I have to validate this name. So I'm going to use a while loop to do that. This is a pretest loop. I'm going to use the same symbol. I'm going to place it right below my input. And I'm going to go and I'm going to determine whether their name is a number. So my condition is, you'll notice how I type in the is underscore n, it brings up that particular function, and then my value or my variable I'm going to put in there is name. So is number, if it is a number, in this case it will exit the loop. But I don't want it to exit the loop if it's a number. I want it to repeat. So I need to change my logic. And my logic here I can change a couple different ways. I can change is number to is string, or I can simply use my not operator and have a function within a condition. So is number name, if that returns true, not will then make it false. If it's false, it will go and it will continue to do the loop. Because this is a pretest loop, it's going to check this first. If my name is not a number, then it's going to exit. If it is a number, then I'm going to ask the user to enter it. Please re-enter their name, and it will continue to loop until the user enters in the name without any numbers associated with it. The user will continue to enter their name until they enter something that is not solely numbers. So I have these taken care of. I'll come back and I'll put the comments in a little bit later. My next step is to go and it's to ask the user to enter in the number of tickets. This is a post-test loop. I'm still going to use the loop symbol, place that in here, but my diamond is now going to be at the bottom. So I'm going to ask the user to enter in the number of tickets that they want, and once they enter in the number of tickets, then I'm going to go through and I'm going to validate it. So I'm going to simply copy my condition from my repeat statement and enter it in my loop condition. So if it is number of tickets, if number of tickets is a number and it's greater than 1 and less than 99, I would like for them to exit out of the loop. So I'm just going to leave it like that. So if it's a number and it's greater than 1 and less than 99, I'm going to have them exit the loop. If not, it will continue. So that is my repeat loop. So I have all of these statements done. They've entered in their name and their number of tickets. So the next thing that we have to do is we have to convert the for loop. Now Raptor doesn't like for loops. So we have to go and we have to add some additional things. Do not add these to your pseudocode. If you do, you're going to have incorrect results, inaccurate results. It is a loop, so I'm going to use my loop symbol. I'm going to come down and place it after the ticket symbol. And I have to do a couple of other things. The first one, I have to go and I have to create this variable. So I'm going to assign count to 1, and I'm going to do that before the loop. This will allow the user to go and enter in. Then my condition is if count is less than or equal to the number of tickets, then I want it to enter in the loop. But my condition for my for loop is the same as the other ones that we have seen. If my count is less than or equal to the number of tickets, if that's true, it's going to follow my yes path and it's going to come out of the loop. So I have to change this to if count is greater than my number of tickets. If count is greater than my number of tickets, then it will exit. If it's not, it will continue with the loop. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm done with the second one. And my last argument is incrementing count by 1. So I'm going to go and I'm going to add my assignment statement to increment count by 1. So count equals count plus 1. And now I have those 3 in Raptor. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to call my get sales tip info. You'll notice I already have it created. I'm going to put my call statement. I'm going to put it before my count just to keep it in line with my for loop. So I'm going to add get sales tip info, and it's going to go and it's going to execute my get sales tip info module. Then it's going to come and it's going to increment count by 1, come back up, check my condition. If my condition is not true, it will continue that loop until it is true. So I have my for loop done. Once I have my for loop done and I have all my data, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my average. To set my average, I use my assignment statement and I'm going to store it in my average tip. And to do this, I take my total tip and I'm going to divide that by count minus 1. Click on done there. And then the last thing I'm going to do before I ask my user is I'm going to execute my display totals. I'm going to execute my display totals module. So I have both of these things all done. So now I have all this information in. My get sales tip info has 2 loops in it. One is to increment the sales, to validate the amount of sales. The second one is to validate the tip amount. Then I'm going to call calc amounts, where it's going to go through and it's going to accumulate those in total sales and total tip. And then my display totals will go and concatenate the name, the total sales, total tip, and average tip with some verbiage. I added this here just for some formatting where it's going to put a blank line. I also did some formatting after my welcome. It just makes your output a little bit neater. So I pulled up the Raptor with all of my comments in it, so it'll be a little bit easier as we step through it. I'm going to use my first set of test data. So I'm going to step through it slowly first, and then I'll go and I'll run it a little bit faster. It comes to my welcome, outputs my welcome, comes and initialize all my variables. You can see my variables line up on the left-hand side. I'm going to enter in my name. The first name is Wendy. Now I go in to verify that or validate that. It is not a number. It comes out of that loop. It asks for the number of tickets. The number of tickets Wendy has is 3, so I'll enter those and I'll step into it. It's going to go and it's going to run my for loop, so I have my count equal to 1. Step into it again. It's going to compare that. Count is greater than the number of tickets. Count is not greater than the number of tickets, so it's going to go and it's going to get my sales information. So it's going to enter in 15. And then my tip amount for that was 3. It validates the numbers, it validates the ranges, and then it goes and it starts my accumulators. So my total sales, 0 plus 15 should be 15. It changes to 15. 0 plus 3 should equal 3. I come out of there. I come back. I'm still in my for loop. I increment count by 1. I determine if count is greater than number of tickets. Well, number of tickets is 3. Count is 2. It's not greater than. So I step into it. I'm on my second ticket. So I enter in the $50. And then my tip amount will be $10. And it will validate that. It will come to my accumulator. So now my total sales is 15 plus 50 should come up with 65. And my total tip is 3 plus 10, so it should come up with 13. And it incremented or it accumulated correctly. Now I come back, I increment count by 1. My count is 3 and my number of tickets is 3. So it's not greater than. I come into it. I put in my last ticket. My last ticket was for $100. And my last tip was for $25. Validates that, comes in, accumulates that in my total sales and my total tip. It comes back. I increment count now by 1. Count is now greater than my number of tickets, so it exits that loop. It calculates the average tip. My average tip is my total tips divided by count minus 1 because I only had 3 tickets. And then it will go and it will display that information. And I'm going to pull up my master console where you can see the blank lines. Again, it makes life a little bit easier to go through and read. I step into it one more time. Here's my Sentinel value. Do I want to process again? Enter yes. If true, enter any other key. If no, I'm going to enter a capital Y. And I'm going to come around and I'm going to run this a little bit faster. And I'm going to enter in the next 2, which will be Joe and Pam. So Joe is 2. I'm going to enter in 150 for the amount, and then I'm going to enter in 30 for the tip. The second one was 73.56. You'll notice I enter a variety of amounts. You want to check ones with decimals, amounts without decimals. It asks if I want to process another server. I'm going to say yes here, and then I'm going to enter in Pam. Pam has 1 ticket. I'm going to enter this off the screen, $1,000 and 50. And then I do not want to enter in another server. So I have mine, which I probably should have entered no after. I have Joe and I have Pam. I haven't entered in any invalid data, so let me show you that real quick. If I enter in a series of numbers for the name, it asks me to please re-enter my name. I'm going to enter David. It asks for the number of tickets. I'm going to enter Apple. It doesn't like that. I'm going to enter 2 for now. I can do the same. I'm going to enter Apple in for the amount. It continues until I enter in a valid number. If I enter in 5,000, it doesn't like that either because that is outside of the range, so it will continue to ask me. And then I'm going to do the same thing for tip. I'm going to enter in Apple. It doesn't like that. So I'm going to enter in 400. It doesn't like that. That is outside of the range. So now I'm going to enter in a regular number that it would take. And because I went through and I think I entered in 4 or something for the number of tickets, it will continue. I'm just going to go ahead and stop it and clear it. In this video, you learned how to move over a post-test loop, a pre-test loop, a for loop into Raptor. The thing with Raptor, again, is your conditions and the yes-no paths on your loop. You want to pay attention to those. If you have any questions on these, please post those on the discussion board or bring them to class with you. Thank you.